On the proposed 2025 budget of the Department of Finance and its attached agencies and corporations and the Anti-Money Laundering Council is now called to order. First, I would like to thank and recognize and acknowledge the presence of Secretary Recto. Good morning, sir. And the entire DOF delegation, as well as the Executive Director, David, and the entire AMLC team, AMLAC. Good morning. I would also like to acknowledge our other resource persons. For orderly procedure, we will begin with the presentation of the agencies. After that, we will open the floor for questions. And then the Secretariat, would you read the names of our resource persons present, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Your Honors, and to all our guests. Allow me to introduce our resource persons present in today's budget briefing. To our resource persons, if your name is called, please raise your hand so the chairperson can identify where you are seated. Thank you. From the Department of Finance, we have Secretary Ralph G. Recto, Undersecretary Nino Raymond Alvina of the Policy Development and Management Services Group, Ase Carlo Fermin Adriano from the Fiscal Policy and Monitoring Group, from the BIR, Commissioner Romeo D. Lumagi Jr., from the BOC, Commissioner Bienvenido Y. Rubio, from the Bureau of Treasury, Treasurer Sharon P. Almanza, from the Bureau of Local Government Finance, Executive Director Consolacion Agkawili, from the Insurance Commission, Commissioner Reynaldo A. Regalado, from the National Tax Research Center, Executive Director Mark Lester Aure, from the Securities and Exchange Commission, Chairperson Emilio B. Aquino, from the Privatization and Management Office, Chief Maan Vanessa Doctor, from the Philippine Tax Academy, President Hil S. Beltran, from the Land Bank of the Philippines, President CEO Maria Lynette Ortiz, from the Development Bank of the Philippines, President CEO Michael O. De Jesus, from Phil Guarantee, President CEO Alberto E. Pascual, from the Maharlika Investment Corporation, President CEO Rafael D. Consing Jr., from the Central Board of Assessment Appeals, Chairperson Robert H. Tobia. We also have representatives from the Anti-Money Laundering Council, Executive Director Attorney Matthew M. David, Director Maria Rhea M. Santos Mendoza, and Deputy Director Arnold G. Frane. We also have representative from the BSP, Deputy Governor Francisco G. Daquila Jr. of the Monetary and Economic Sector, and also present from the DBM, Acting Chief Mercedes de la Cruz, and Acting Chief Marilu Legarde. That is all, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you to our Secretariat. Are you ready with your presentation at DOF? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honorable Grace po. Thank you for this opportunity to brief the committee on the 2025 proposed budget of the Department of Finance, its bureaus, and attached agencies. As the government's chief fundraiser, the Department of Finance is a steward of the nation's fiscal stability. Guided by our refined medium-term fiscal program, the DOF ensures that we hit our revenue targets annually to reduce the deficit and debt gradually in a realistic manner while creating more jobs, increasing our people's incomes, and decreasing poverty in the process. Our fiscal discipline already earned us a credit rating upgrade of A- from RNI, the first under the Marcos Jr. administration. Nagpapatunay po ito na malakas ang kumpiyansa ng mga investors sa sigla ng ating ekonomiya. At ang upgrade na ito ay upgrade rin sa buhay ng mga Pilipino dahil maghahatid po ito ng mas maraming investments at negosyo na magdadala ng maraming trabaho at mas mataas na kita para sa bawat Pilipino. And this will not be our last upgrade as long as we stick to our medium-term fiscal program. And this is our blueprint for the road to more A's in the near future. More importantly, our efforts have led to a stronger labor force, a growing middle class, and more comfortable lives for Filipinos. Mas kaunti na po ang bilang ng mga walang trabaho dahil ang unemployment rate sa bansa ay nasa pinakamababang level na 3.1%. Mahigit 50.3 milyong Pilipino na ang may trabaho, kung saan 63.8 nito ay nasa formal na sektor. Bumaba rin ang ating poverty rate sa 15.5%. Ang katumbas nito ay 2.5 milyong Pilipino na naiangat natin mula sa kahirapan. We are on our way to reducing the poverty rate to just 9% by 2028. And we are on track to meet our fiscal program for the year with the robust performances of the Bureau of Internal Revenue, the Bureau of Customs, the Bureau of Treasury, and our GOCCs. For the first 7 months of 2024, revenue collections have reached 2.61 trillion pesos, 14.8% higher than last year, of which tax collections from the BIR and BOC grew by 11%, reaching 2.24 trillion pesos. Non-tax revenues recorded a 44.5% growth, totaling 368.8 billion pesos. The dividends from our GOCCs contributed much to this increase. The strong revenue performance placed us among Asia's top revenue to GDP ratios at 17.1% for the first half of the year, and this is above our full-year target of 16.1%. We credit this feat to the BIR and BOC's brave digitalization strategies and the balikatan with allied agencies to kick our revenue operations into high gear. As we ramp up BRAVE, we anticipate a 10.3% average annual growth in total revenues over the medium term to support our people's growing needs. Revenues as a percentage of GDP will increase from 16.1% in 2024 to 17% in 2028. With higher revenues and improved expenditure management, our fiscal deficit is projected to drop from 5.6% in 2024 to 3.7% by 2028. We also continue to manage our debt according to the highest standards of fiscal prudence. As of June, our gross financing stands at 61% of the full-year goal of 2.57 trillion pesos. And this is being supported by a financing program that favors domestic borrowings. We will ensure that the economy will continue to outgrow the country's debt, with our debt to GDP ratio dropping from 60.6% in 2024 to 56.3% in 2028. Achieving these targets requires the passage of key revenue reforms pending in Congress, which we have recalibrated to avoid placing undue burdens on our people. Above all, the continued implementation of digitalization reforms and revenue-enhancing programs is crucial to sustaining our collection growth. Thus, we hope for the swift approval of the DOF's 2025 proposed budget, which puts sharpened focus on these key priorities so we can fund the nation's gargantuan budget. To put it into perspective, the 2025 proposed national budget stands at 6.35 trillion pesos, of which only 4.64 trillion pesos are supportable by revenues. Thus, for next year, our expenditures amount to 17.4 billion pesos a day, of which 12.72 billion pesos per day will be financed by revenue collections, and the rest, 4.68 billion pesos, by loans every 24 hours. Ganito po kabigat ang kailangan gawin ng DOF kada 24 oras. With our minuscule proposed budget of only 33.75 billion pesos for next year. The amount is 20.8% higher than the 2024 GA level, but represents only 0.5% of the government's total proposed 2025 national budget. The new general appropriations constitute the largest portion of our proposed budget, amounting to 29 billion pesos. About 78% or 22.6 billion pesos of these new appropriations is allocated to support the department's core operations and priority programs. This include enhanced revenue administration by the BIR, better financial asset and debt management by the BTR, customs enhancement by the BOC, and improved local finance administration by the Bureau of Local Government Finance. Automatic appropriations totaling 3.48 billion pesos represent allocations for retirement and life insurance premiums as well as the special accounts in the general fund. And under the special purpose fund, we have a 1 billion peso allocation for the replenishment of the People's Survival Fund, which will support numerous climate adaptation projects of our local communities. Meanwhile, the budgetary support to government corporations amounting to 58.2 million pesos is allocated for the Philippine Tax Academy Specialized Tax and Education Management Programs. A proposed unprogrammed appropriation of 210.57 million pesos is also included for the refund of the service development fee for the right to develop the Nampei Dai property in Japan. This is significantly lower by 79.9% due to the concluding year of the implementation of the BOC's Philippine Customs Modernization Project and the reclassification of the BLGF's Local Governance Reform Program under new general appropriations. As the bearer of the heaviest burden, the BIR will receive the largest share of the budget, totaling 17.68 billion pesos. This makes up for more than half or 54.4% of the total DOF proposed budget. Kung tutusin, sulit na sulit po ang budget na ito ng BIR dahil sila ay aatasang kumolekta ng 3.23 trillion pesos in revenues next year. Ang 17.68 billion pesos na budget ay koleksyon lang nila sa loob lang 2 araw. Ang BOC naman ay may proposed budget na 5.66 billion lang kumpara sa kokolektahin nilang 1.06 trillion pesos sa susunod na taon. Ang halaga nito ay koleksyon lang nila sa loob ng 48 oras, 2 araw. Ang ating kagawaran ng Ingat Yaman o BTR ay may budget allocation na 6.46 billion pesos kumpara sa bigat ng kanilang responsibilidad na punan ang 1.54 trillion na deficit sa 2025. In terms of allocation, 41.4% of our proposed budget is allocated to personnel services, 37.9% to MOOE, and 20.6% to capital outlays. This is in line with our commitment to prioritize workforce development and infrastructure improvements like digitalization. In fact, we are making significant digital transformation investments across agencies. The BIR, BOC, and IC lead the charge with a combined amount of 4.2 billion pesos for digitalization, while other agencies are allotted around 600 million pesos. These investments are aimed at significantly enhancing taxpayer experience, streamlining trade processes, and improving fiscal transparency. Let me now provide you with the specific budget proposals of each DOF agency. As mentioned earlier, the BIR has a proposed budget of 17.68 billion pesos, a 12.4% increase from this year's GAA. Capital outlay is the biggest increase to fund the construction, renovation, and rehabilitation of BIR office buildings, as well as the acquisition of 62 motor vehicles. This likewise supports the BIR's new, expanded, and ongoing digitalization programs and projects. Its MOE amounting to 6 billion pesos will support critical operations to sustain ICT programs and projects, particularly electronic services. The proposed allocation of 8.92 billion pesos for personal services will cover salaries, compensation, and other benefits for its 15,666 permanent employees. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Treasury's proposed budget of 6.46 billion pesos is 52.8% higher than the previous year. Its MOE of 3.25 billion pesos will address the Bureau's ongoing and recurring costs. The notable increase of 2.08 billion pesos is primarily due to the National Indemnity Insurance Program, which aims to protect the national government's strategically important assets against natural disasters. The 2025 program will cover public schools as well as hospitals and healthcare facilities across the country. Meanwhile, the capital outlay requirements of 2.7 billion pesos include funding for membership quota, subscriptions, and equity contributions to multilateral institutions through the International Commitments Fund. This will also consist of the procurement of 5 motor vehicles and continued investment in ICT-related programs and projects. The BOC's budget, on the other hand, increased by 18.9% to 5.66 billion pesos. Its personnel services allocation of 1.9 billion pesos will cover salaries for 3,726 permanent positions, and the additional 164.1 million pesos is allocated for retirement and life insurance premiums. The proposed MOE budget of 1.44 billion pesos under new general appropriations will support the implementation of the Customs Revenue Enhancement Program and the Customs Border Protection and Cargo Control Program. The capital outlay requirement of 742.9 million pesos will fund the acquisition of 17 service vehicles, investments in various ICT and office equipment, and the construction of the second phase of the new BOC building at the Iloilo Commercial Port Complex. The IC has proposed a total budget of 1 billion pesos, which includes a nominal allocation of 6,000 pesos under the new general appropriations for augmentation purposes. Its MOE amounting to 434.58 million pesos will be utilized for increased investments in ICT programs and projects, while the capital outlay of 246.65 million includes the upgrading and modernization of its data center. Meanwhile, the DOF, Office of the Secretaries, proposed 966.97 million peso budget is 4% lower than this year's GAA level. The MOE budget of 491.25 million pesos will facilitate the office's financial sustainability and revenue strengthening program as well as the asset liability management program. The marginal increase of 1% in MOE includes a 9.2 million pesos for the Philippines hosting of the double taxation agreement negotiations and renegotiations. Meanwhile, the capital outlay requirements amounting to 47.46 million pesos will support OSEC's digitalization and modernization initiatives. For the BLGF, its budget will increase by 28.9% to 433.66 million pesos next year. This is mainly due to the Bureau's capital outlay requirements of 90.08 million pesos to cover the procurement of 12 motor vehicles, various construction projects, and replacement of office equipment. This will also support the government's share of the ADB-funded local governance reform project. The National Tax Research Center has a proposed budget of 144.11 million pesos, an 11.2% decrease from previous year. The reduction is primarily due to the retirement of NTRC officials, and a decrease in the funding requirements for its ICT projects and programs. Nevertheless, the proposed capital outlay allocation will support the enhancement and upgrading of NTRC's ICT infrastructure, including the improvement of the fiscal incentives registration and monitoring system and center's website. Meanwhile, the Privatization and Management Office proposed budget will increase by 8.7% to 111.6 million. This will enable the PMO to effectively oversee the privatization of government assets as we maximize non-tax revenue sources. Finally, the Central Board of Assessment Appeals has a proposed budget of 18 million pesos, 2.49% higher than the previous year. This is meant to effectively fulfill its responsibilities centered on resolving assessment disputes and ensuring equitable resolution of property valuation and assessment cases. As I end my presentation, let me assure the honorable members of this committee that this budget proposal adheres to the highest standards of fiscal discipline and prudent financial management. In fact, for our operations in 2023, and for the third year in a row, the DOF received an unmodified or unqualified opinion from COA. Ibig sabihin na tiyak po ng auditor na ang ating financial statements ay naayon sa applicable financial reporting framework. Ito po ay preba ng ating good governance, transparency, at accountability. And through the years, the DOF has constantly proven its capability to exercise sound and responsible budget utilization. Our first semester performance clearly shows this. With a total allotment of 58.36 billion pesos, the DOF has achieved an obligation rate of 70%, translating to 40.85 billion pesos in obligations. In fact, the DOF ranks as the fourth highest among government agencies in terms of obligation rates. This is well above the entire government's average obligation rate of 65.4%. Walang natutulog na pera. The disbursement rate also reached a robust 90% with 36.87 billion pesos expended during this period. You can be assured of the same level of budget utilization efficiency next year and beyond. More importantly, our proposed budget every year is always a faithful reflection of our strategic priorities under the Bagong Pilipinas brand of governance. The items discussed today are part and parcel of a larger effort to improve tax administration efficiency, deliver more responsive public service delivery, and provide economic prosperity for the Filipino people. We will ensure that every peso is being stretched to deliver the biggest bang per buck for the Filipino people. Much like our triumphant Olympians, we will always go for the gold. And with your support, that is precisely what we aim to achieve at every level and every agency under us. Maraming salamat po, and we are now ready to answer any question.
Thank you, Secretary Ralph. This is your first budget presentation? Or is this the second here?
The second for the committee, the first was the DBCC, and now the DOF budget.
But
for the DOF
for the
budget.
entire, wait, this is the first budget hearing, right?
That is correct, for the DOF budget. Yes,
And
madam.
actually, you're perfect for the role, and I'd like to thank you. I know that the DOF and its well, the DOF in particular is very professional.
Yeah.
I've worked with several of your undersecretaries, and I'm actually very impressed that you do the work in most of our hearings. The DOF is the one that's always prepared. I would also
Very fortunate to be working with all of them.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
then they're also fortunate to have you at the helm. But I would like to ask a few things. I mean, what we like about having you, Secretary Ralph, head the agency is that you break down in understandable terms what the government is actually earning and spending. For example, we're spending 17.40 billion pesos a day
For next year.
for next year.
That's correct.
And about so in the total, every day we are borrowing 4.68 billion.
For next year, that's correct.
Yeah, but then our revenues per day is 12.72. So
Correct.
this is something that we really that guides us in terms of fiscal management. It's important to know how much magkano dun sa ginagastos natin, yung talagang galing sa ating nakatabi na pera at nakolekta at magkano naman yung nauutang. Pero I also understand that there's a good percentage of the borrowings are coming from local banks, right?
70% from
70%.
domestic sources, yes.
So hindi tayo apektado masyado kung nagtataas yung
Yung
dollar o kung
exchange rate, that is correct.
exchange rate.
That's correct.
Okay.
In
So
fact, we're a net lender because we have $105 billion in reserves, and our total foreign exchange debt is about 86 billion.
so our reserve is how much again, sir?
Roughly $105 billion.
105 billion.
Yeah.
And our loans?
Our loans is about, in foreign exchange, about $86 billion, more or less.
This is in foreign exchange.
In foreign exchange, that's correct.
Thank you. Well, since there's no one here, usually the chairman will ask last, but I'll ask now
Yes,
again.
please.
There are actually begin with the foreign direct investments. We noticed in 2023, wala ka pa doon, there was a considerable decrease in FDIs
Yes.
on specific sectors, which is alarming, as information and communications, which is a 53% decrease apparently, and professional, scientific, and technical activities with a 58% decrease. These are critical industries for us, revenue generating industries, particularly for information and communication. So may we hear from you, sir, what led to this noticeable decrease, and given this still discouraging amount of investment in 2024, ano bang pwedeng magawa natin? Kasama ba dito yung probably yung amendment natin sa CREATE? You think this contributed to the exodus of
Yeah.
some of these business?
Yeah.
If you can please expound on it.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, first and foremost, global investments have gone down, not only in the Philippines, but globally. And that is cost, one, because of the geopolitical tensions.
Excuse me, sir. May we ask the technical service what's going on with this sound system? Galing ba to sa kabilang hearing? Whoever is online, please mute your connection.
Mm.
Unless you want to speak now.
Okay. Well, unang-una, it's I suppose it's because of the geopolitical tensions. You will recall that in 2022, you had the Russia-Ukraine war. Well, first we came out of a pandemic, and because of that, you had supply issues. Inflation went up. Then you had the war. Interest rates had to go up. All around the world, our policy rates hit as high as 6.5%. The US Fed increased the rates to about 5%, 4.5 to 5%. The highest in 17 years. Okay? And naturally, you expect that all global investments have gone down. Then you have all these trade tensions, and then you have a war in the Middle East. So expectedly, that investments will be reduced or has gone down. The CREATE bill as well, I suppose, or the CREATE bill as well did not help because it limited the incentives to foreign investments. And that's why we're taking up now in the Senate the Create More bill, which I expect will be passed pretty soon. That would be a tremendous help in attracting more FDIs. Moreover, or at this point in time, the Banco Central has started to reduce interest rates. We expect rates to continue to go down this year and next year, not only in the Philippines, but globally. And having said that, expectedly, we would be able to expect more investment in the coming years ahead. That's how we look at it, Madam Chair. But
But
in
have
spite of that, the economy continued to grow on the average of 6% in the last 2 years, brought by public and some private investments, also domestic.
actually quite good news. That's why it's also quite ironic. Our FDIs have decreased, but
Yes.
actually our GDP continues to increase. So our
Correct.
local industries are robust, I suppose, together with consumer spending,
That is correct.
as
That is
we
correct, yes.
understand. So, but what is now the FDI investments currently? Is it on the rise? Is it currently increasing, or we continue?
I think our
Is it-
target for the year is roughly $9 to $10 billion dollars. Deputy Governor Dagila would have the data with the BSP. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As of now, we have actually revised our assessment of foreign direct investments for 2024. We've upgraded that in the first quarter of this year. We were assessing level of around $9 billion. We've upgraded that to $9.5 billion. For 2025, we've also upgraded our assessment of foreign direct investments from $9 billion to $10.5 billion.
What was it in 2023, sir?
In 2023, the actual level was at $8.9 billion. This is net foreign direct investments, Madam Chair.
So, can you tell me if there was an impact on the amendment for the Public Service Act? Do we have any companies that are in the past not allowed to own at a more than 40% of the business now investing in the Philippines with easing of ownership restrictions?
What we've seen is that the FDI has
It's okay, sir. You can just submit that to that would be for
But
another
having
year.
said that, I think it is a welcome development that we've liberalized certain sectors in the economy. It's just unfortunate that we had the pandemic, number one, and then you had this global geopolitical tensions. And of course, you have high interest rates. Once these tensions subside and interest rates go down, we expect that there will be interest in this liberalizing and investments in these areas that we've liberalized.
I understand that. However, our neighbors, for example, Vietnam, have seen an increased FDI investment in spite of the other factors that affect the global economy. Maybe it's also because of their relationship with countries like China, where they can separate their uh, territorial dispute from their economic relationships. So this is something that we still need to be able to balance. Um, you've mentioned the poverty rate decline, and now stands at, if I'm correct, if I heard you correct, at 9%.
15.5. The
Fif-
target is 9% by the end of the BBM administration.
I think this was actually very controversial in our DBCC
Yes.
hearing because of the basis for computation,
Yes,
which is how much again per day?
something like 90 pesos, thereabout.
Right. So if we use a more reasonable computation, this will actually increase, right?
Correct. But having said that, that trend will still be going down. Meaning to say, even if we adjust it to whatever number the committee may choose at 200 pesos, and then you go back from the beginning, the trajectory would still be on a downward slope.
Maybe I can ask this from Neda because this is not within your purview, but we will ask. We should actually have a better computation, just so let's say
Yes,
a more reasonable one that we can present. So this will obviously increase, but that's for another hearing.
yes.
Not
But still at a downward slope.
At
It
least,
will
yeah.
increase, but if you, for consistency, it will be higher, but downward. But I just wanted to point out as well that I think we were conscious when we were doing the budget for 2025. Also in 2024, we looked at self-rated poverty, and it's roughly 50%. And that is why we have programs in government to assist 13 million families in the social protection programs. And that budget is roughly about 560 billion this year, and about, if I remember correctly, roughly 590 billion next year to assist 13 million families, because that is the more or less the self-rated poverty.
13, 1 3, right?
Yes, one
One
that's
three, so
half,
that's times 5. So that will be
that's
more or
half
less
of
half
all
our
the families.
population.
Yes,
Yes, yes.
that's correct.
So thank you. The other question is the customs modernization project. I know that there is actually how much again in the budget is for customs modernization?
I think total in the DOF is about 4 billion. And yeah, for the entire DOF, for BOC, 197, 987. A little less than a billion for BOC.
Less than 1 billion.
Yes.
And that includes the entire budget for modernization of the customs, or do they have one in separate in their
That would
own?
be many digitalization programs of the BOC. It's not only one program.
So that
Yeah.
so the 1 billion will
Yes.
be for digitalization.
Of BOC. Yes.
Can you explain to me exactly ano bang pagkakaiba ngayon? What do we mean by digitalization? Because initially in our DBCC we were discussing the um window inspection. Ano ba yung tawag?
Yes.
A single window
Yeah.
inspection. Is that
Yes. The national single window is a government-wide system, not only for the BOC, but it's part of the BOC. But maybe at this juncture, I'd like to recognize, with the permission of the chair, Commissioner Rubio to explain more about the digitalization efforts of the BOC.
yes, please.
Good morning, Madam Chairman.
Good morning.
Everyone. The digitalization of BOC accounts for the proposal to upgrade our current E2M system into to the a more what we call the CPS, the customs processing, to upgrade our customs processing system. The reason why we need to update our E2M is because our E2M was based on the old TCCP law, and it's not based on the CMTA. Now, with all the modernization that was introduced with our CMTA, the old system, the E2M, could no longer accommodate all of these processes. So we need to upgrade our customs processing system to include and integrate all the things that were included in the new law, the CMTA, ma'am. Unfortunately, because of the legal impediment, we were unable to modernize our current customs processing system.
So what's going to happen now? You have that budget of 1 billion, but we haven't really cleared our legal impediments. Is that
Ma'am, Madam Chair, the budget for the 997 budget accounts for uh enhancing our current this does not represent our the
single window?
upgrade of the CPS, but actually it will account for uh several projects that we need to uh and this includes the district port structured cabling and wireless infrastructure, the BOC fraud analytics, the regional data center, the supply and delivery of desktop computer, internet subscription that we're currently paying, various software subscription that we are currently paying, and then various training and procurement of various printer and external hard drive. Ma'am, and the total is about 997 billion.
So
Ay, million, ma'am.
yes, I understand it's really important to upgrade our the system, the processes also. But by doing so, how do you think this will help your agency collect more and to actually lessen corruption?
Um, by being, Madam Chair, by being able to integrate all of the systems into a new customs processing system, we will be able to lessen face-to-face transactions. We'll be able to streamline processes, and overall, the turnaround of the simpler uh, transaction methods, then overall, the turnaround of the trade, import, and export will be faster, ma'am.
So have you already bidded this project or not yet? You don't have yet somebody who will provide the service for, let's say, an upgrade. Do you have companies in mind that will do this?
Um, uh, Madam Chair, currently, there's a TAWG that's been
EWG.
that's been considering the unsolicited proposal for PPP for our the procurement of our.
I think you better be careful about choosing kasi ayan na naman. Baka somebody will file a case against the BOC and then this will again be delayed. Like for the national single window system, Secretary Ralph, you mentioned that if there is uh, the problem with the BOC, you can actually have the implement this.
That's correct.
So where are we now in this
We have
initiative?
we have a technical working group right now. We're working with the BOC, the DOF, the DICT, among others. There is a proposal for a PPP project. The proponent is Temasek. So one of the
Temasek.
better, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Singapore.
Okay, at Temasek, no?
Yes,
So I don't think they only provide funding, correct?
I think they have
Or they
a.
also have a technical.
I think they do have a technical. They have it's a joint venture with a
Okay.
Singaporean firm.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, the proposal is only 500 million. Do we have anyone here?
But what's our time frame, sir? Like when do you think we have our TWG now?
500 million, no? More or less.
When do you think we can start with the project?
My understanding is that within 2 years, the
Within-
major digitalization efforts of the BIR and the BOC would be more or less done. We're giving ourselves a 2-year period. My understanding is that by next year, we would have been able to accomplish a lot, hopefully, by the end of next year, including the national single window.
Actually,
For a few departments muna, before all the other departments will be able to be on board.
yeah, because I think the one that yields the highest revenue should also be prioritized. But I mean, potential highest revenue. In fact, I hear stories, Commissioner, pasensya na baka mga kasama, within the customs, ayaw magpa-upgrade daw. Dahil, syempre, pag na-upgrade na yung system, lahat digital na, less face-to-face, eh, mahihirapan may makalusot. So I'm hoping now with you at the helm, our Customs Commissioner, with working with Secretary Ralph, we can expedite this. I think it will really make a difference also in terms of the reputation of the agencies. Diba? Wala na silang masyadong masisisi kung digital na. Ito na talaga yung ating makuha. Kasi ang hirap kung, let's say you're an importer, you're very well-meaning. Like for example,
Yes.
let me give you an example. There's um, uh, like a medical facility and they're importing MRI equipment. Okay, then there are certain requirements like for example, kasi may picture doon, merong, 'di ba, kinukuha na ng picture sa MRI, 'di ba? Merong film involved. Kailangan kumuha ng permit sa OMB o what do you call this, no? Ano ba yun? Yung the one that gives permits for mga VHS in the past. Oh, optical media board. And the optical media board is not anymore very active. In fact, there was a plan to dissolve that agency. So uh, the applicants are in limbo because it takes weeks from the OMB to approve. That's the problem also is interagency cooperation. Um, Obviously they're not importing CDs or DVDs. These are for medical purposes, but because there's a component of photos, they have to go through the optical media board. So these are things that I hope we can probably streamline if you are working with other agencies for permits because it takes a while. For example, another one is I don't know if you've heard, but lately the imports of food products coming from abroad through NAIA, yung mga kailangan sa mga restaurants, um, it's not the problem of the BOC. It's actually a coordination of the BOC and the Department of Agriculture because they now have new guidelines because of the swine flu, etc. So ang daming mga pagkain na nakatenga sa NAIA na hindi mapasok. Initially, lumalapit sa office namin to ask the help of the BOC. But apparently, hindi BOC, it's the Department of Agriculture. So there are miscommunications also and guidelines for importations. But that's for another, that's why it's always important to have everything digitalized. So the rules are very clear what they need to do in order to import these things. My other question now will be with the GOCCs. Secretary Ralph, would you know which GOCCs are actually the top performing GOCCs and which ones are the underperforming ones that we need to heavily subsidize?
When you say top performing, we're talking about revenues, I suppose. Yes. Well, first thing that comes to mind, I suppose, would be Pagcor right now. Well, no, Land Bank would be number one. They're the
Land Bank.
biggest contributor to dividends. So thank you, Lynette, for all the dividends.
How much is the dividend now?
Last year, roughly about 35 billion. If I recall, 32 billion, yeah.
And you were already able to take out your initial investment for the Maharlika Fund.
Mhm.
Okay. May I ask the Land Bank while we're with you? The problem, let's say you're a small-time farmer or an entrepreneur, it seems like some of the questions is that the Land Bank and the DBP are acting like regular commercial banks. And it's difficult to obtain a loan if you're, let's say, a small-time farmer, which was the real intent of these two development banks is to prioritize um, maybe the other sectors of the economy and not just the big businesses or industries. Can you tell us a percentage of your loans how much of it goes to MSMEs and let's say the agricultural sector? First the land bank, and then I will ask the DBP later on. And then also the proposed merger of the land bank and DBP, is that dead in the water? And why is it so? Is it better that way, that you are a separate bank, or is it better that you actually merge? So ma'am, with my first question, the ratio of your loans.
Thank you, ma'am. So, for land bank, ma'am, we have about 1.3 trillion in total loans, of which about 711 billion would be allocated, or has been rather allocated, to the new agriculture, fisheries, and rural development financing. That's been very consistent with the new law, RA 11903. And we have been very purposeful and intentional in actually ensuring that we're true to our mandate of supporting farmers. We have several lending programs which we've already streamlined to make sure that this outreach is also easier for farmers to actually apply for and meet all the requirements. Out of that 711 billion, about 200 plus billion are really strictly for farmers and the agriculture sector.
I Well, of course, I mean it's good that it goes to that particular sector,
Yes.
but the breakdown also of the businesses that have obtained loans for the agricultural sector, are they big businesses anyway, or they are individual farmers? Do you have data on that?
We have that, ma'am, and it's actually a mix of both. Uh, so for the farmers themselves, we could provide you that information.
Yes, please.
For the small farmers and fishers, ma'am.
For example, ma'am, I don't know if they're following this hearing at all. Let's say you're a farmer, you don't, you're really a small time farmer, and then you go to the land bank. What requirements would you have for them to be able to obtain a loan? Of course, some of them will have very limited orientation as to all of these technical terms and documents that they might need. What are the bare minimum documents that need to be submitted for them to obtain a loan? Let's say they need 50,000 pesos. Do you give something that low, 100,000?
Yes, we do, ma'am. So we have this Agri-Senso lending program. And one of the requirements is that they have to be registered in the DA database. And then, of course, I suppose the actual land titles that they have, they need to as well have uh, so apart from that, ma'am, I guess the capacity to also meet the requirements. As far as documentation is concerned, we have whittled down the 15-page requirement that we had to just one. And we actually have agri-hubs in the specific branches to actually assist farmers in the application. So we've really made it simpler and more accessible and convenient.
Yes, can you submit that to me?
Yes, ma'am.
That one-page document. I'm glad to hear that from 15 pages, it's now reduced to one. But you said other qualifications aside from the land title, their ability to pay, for example. So, we don't have really a credit score so much here in the
No.
Philippines. So I guess you'll ask how much debts they have, right?
That's correct, ma'am. So it's really it's in a way very customized so that there will be a proper assessment. But we've been there are two ways that we fund the farmers actually, ma'am, Madam Chair. One is we have a Department of Agriculture funding that's really been allocated. So that's separate, that's off books, and we manage that. The other way is that we also have our own balance sheet, which we extend to farmers. So
Well,
we
what do you mean
marry.
by off books? I'm sorry.
Sorry,
So,
ma'am.
so the first one is that
the, f- the
through.
there are two ways, ma'am.
Okay.
So one is we have funding that has been allocated through legislated special programs. And this is the Agriculture Competitiveness Enhancement
Yes.
Lending Program with the DA. So there are a number of these programs, and our role there is to manage these funds and actually ensure that we extend lending facilities directly to the farmers. But on top of that, we also supplement it using our own funds in land bank, and we have that AgriSensa program which I mentioned earlier, to just ensure that on top of the DA's funds, that we also support farmers and fishers and rural development.
Yeah,
Generally.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Eh
you.
kung ganyan kabait yung mga haharap sa mga farmers, I'm sure they'll feel more confident. Eh, so if you can submit to me that one-page application, that will be very helpful. So thank you for
Yes, ma'am. Thank
for
you.
the report on how much is actually allocated to our farmers. May I ask now the DBP, sir, how much of the loans that you extend actually go to MSMEs?
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Our total loan portfolio is approximately 500 billion pesos. And we target basically large infrastructure projects, energy projects, but we also target SMEs. Maybe our SME now, maybe about 15%, about 15% of our loans are considered SME loans. But it is a target market of ours.
Okay, so I understand with the name itself, development. So it's large infrastructure projects that are being funded. Now, who approves these large infrastructure projects? Is it let's say it's how much again? You said you had about 500 billion, right, in loans extended. Let's say is there a cutoff for loans being extended that the board has to approve it?
The board is a very active board, so our cutoff is about anything over 450 million pesos secured goes to the board, and anything over 150 million clean goes to the board. So practically a lot of these things go to the board for the big projects.
And if it's less than 450 million, who approves it?
This goes to a management credit committee.
A management credit
Yes.
committee. Because sometimes there's some controversy in the DBP that those that actually obtain loans are the ones that are favored, so to speak, by an administration, or I guess basically cronyism. So in this case, since you assumed office, may I ask what companies have received the bulk of the loans that you have extended? Like in the past year, how much loans have you extended? And can you give me an example of companies that have obtained those loans?
The bulk of our loans, maybe about 50-60%, are to government, to agencies and local government units. In terms of the private sector, our biggest, we lend to PISAM, which is government, but we also lend to a lot of power projects which are run by, let's say, Metro Pacific could be a borrower. We have numerous power projects basically that we have done. In terms of cronyism, we have never, at least in this since we joined, we've never been approached by anyone to provide. We've never been coerced or encouraged to finance any particular company. We are similar to we are like, although we're government, we are like a private bank. We want to make sure that when we lend, we're going to get paid.
Paid.
Having said that, everything we do has a developmental aspect. So everything is a balance. At the same time, even though it's purely developmental, if we know we're not going to be paid, we don't lend. For example, one of our mandates is the public vehicle modernization. Our past due has gone up to about 20-25%. So we put a hold on that. Although that is our mandate, we can't. It won't be sustainable if we continue lending and there's going to be a high past due. So we have to understand why there's a past due, and maybe address those issues. But the bank is professionally managed. The people are professionally trained, and maybe in the past, there have been
Oh
instances
yeah,
about
I meant the past. I wasn't saying in the current, and
Yeah.
we just want to ensure that we continue with the
Mm.
objective requirements of those that will be granted the loan. And I think the biggest incentive is for you to be paid back,
Yeah.
and I can appreciate that. But since you touched on a particular issue that was also gnawed at us, which is the modernization project. Um, of course, you have to be fiscally responsible, but this is also a government priority for development, which is to modernize uh, the transportation sector. So you're telling me that a lot have actually were unable to pay back their loans. Are these cooperatives, sir?
These are cooperatives. I think the past due rate has gone as high as 25%, which is very high. So I think the route plans are just changed arbitrarily. So before we lend, we have to make sure there are approved route plans by the local government. And we also want to make sure there's a bigger down payment before we lend. Before I think there could be a 5% equity. Now we're asking for higher equity, maybe 20, 25% or 30%. So that have more skin in the game, basically.
Right.
But
See,
so we look for ways how to make it doable. We just don't arbitrarily stop.
would you be able to provide us with a list of the cooperatives that have been unable to meet their obligations? And the reason why I ask this is not to publicly shame them, but it's a study because right now, as you know, the senators have actually signed a petition to halt temporarily the modernization program. Not because we don't believe in modernization, of course we do. Unfortunately, it's not been planned out and executed properly. As you said, there are no specific routes yet in many areas, and they keep changing the goalposts in the middle of the game. I mean, I don't even know if we can call it the middle of the game. They barely really started. So, if you can just give us an example, if you don't want to name you can just submit it to our office so we can talk to DOTR in confidence also and present to them. Look, I mean, you also have to vet the cooperatives that you are accrediting. And some of them are just getting money from these poor drivers to be part of the cooperative. They obtain a loan and then later on they'll shut down and they don't really have any operations.
We'll do that, Madam
Yeah.
Senator.
Thank you, sir. And I'm glad you're also at the helm. You know, you have a very good reputation also in your circle, and we need somebody respected to take care of both institutions, the Land Bank and the DBP. But Mr. Secretary Recto, can you please tell me, there was a proposal actually to merge the Land Bank and the
Yes.
DBP. Where are we there, and have we studied if this is actually something that will be beneficial to us or not?
There are two bills right now in the Senate, and my understanding is that this will be passed before you go on break in the Senate. It increases the capitalization of Land Bank and DBP. We've decided not to merge the two banks. I think even in government, it is good to have competition, and that's why we still have both the Land Bank and the DBP. The idea also is to increase both their capitalization at the same time, to help professionalize it by way of allowing them to raise money from the public and possibly to be the first SOC or state-owned enterprise SOE to be listed in the stock exchange. Yes,
They're not listed right now.
they're not listed right now.
Okay.
So
So we
once the bill is passed, then it would allow for it.
so we've changed the position because in the past we were thinking of the idea of probably
I
merging
think the
them.
previous administration was
Mm.
thinking about it, but this administration, in our discussions, never considered merging the two.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. In fact, now, Mr. De Sousa's, the president of the DBM has mentioned, their focus is really on development. And when you think about development, of course, you can talk about retail lending also to the small businesses, but our focus now also, we have to have one dedicated to large scale projects, which is infrastructure, which has been really also our priority here in terms of expansion. May I ask now a few things about the funding for the, the initial proposal, which, you know, Secretary Ralph, you've been unfairly blamed. Actually, the proposal of using some of the what do you call this, the reserve funds of the PhilHealth,
Fund
okay,
fund balances.
the fund
Yes,
balances
yes.
to
We did
fund
not touch the reserve fund.
yeah, okay, to
Yeah.
fund balances
Yes.
that were supposed to be
Okay.
anyway allocated for health, 'di ba? Paying yung mga mababayaran na natin yung mga health workers
That's
natin, 'di ba?
correct. Yes.
So that was about 80 billion.
Yeah, roughly about 90 billion.
90
We've
billion.
already received roughly 30 billion.
30 billion. But we are allocating actually for the PhilHealth in this 2025 budget
Correct.
close to that amount, right?
Mga 70, if I'm not mistaken.
About 70
next
billion.
year, yes.
So, of course, others are saying that the whatever is with the PhilHealth should stay there, and they should just um, increase the benefits
Benefit
of
packages,
their
yes.
subscribers. So that's exactly what we told the PhilHealth
Yes.
chairman. Then
Correct.
why don't you do that? You have roughly about 500 billion that's available to do that, right?
That's correct. Yes.
So anyway, so right now
Yes.
they have remitted 30
30
billion
billion.
out of the, how much were they supposed to give?
89.9.
89.9 billion.
Yes,
Now there is actually a pending case in the Supreme Court.
that's correct.
So may we ask you, Secretary, is there a hold now, or is the Supreme Court hasn't released the TRO?
There is no TRO. We will abide by the decision of the Supreme Court or even by Congress. If Congress passes a law telling us to stop and to give back the money, we will do so. If the Supreme Court says the same thing, we will do so. As I did mention during our DBCC, inutusan lang kami ng Kongreso at sumusunod lang kami sa utos ng Kongreso. It's found in the General Appropriations Act of 2024. Having said that, we also feel that there is no one is hurt in the sense that even PhilHealth has increased their benefit package by 30%. All case rates went up by 30%. To give you one example, breast cancer is 100,000 pesos. Now they've increased that to 1.4 million.
But of course, they also increased their the payment for the employers. Like I think it's now an increase by 5 or 10%.
Yes,
every
it's
year.
5% that's shared by both employer and employer. That was a law passed in 2018 when PhilHealth didn't have much resources. In fact, I think I was the principal author of that, and walang pera ang PhilHealth doon. And their revenues and expenditures did match. It was something like 115 billion in revenues, and they would spend roughly 115 billion also in benefit packages. So we did increase that over time. And like I mentioned during the DBCC, nag-umpisang kumita ang PhilHealth noong panahon ng pandemic dahil wala sila masyadong ginastos during the pandemic. It was the national government who spent during the pandemic. It was the national government who borrowed the money during the pandemic. And of course, after the pandemic, those rate increases pushed up. And today, the revenue of PhilHealth is roughly about 250 billion a year. Their expenses would roughly be about 160. So they would make about 90 billion, more or less.
I mean, of course, it's magandang pakinggan, no? Nagkaroon ng reserba ang PhilHealth. Pero yung ating debt to GDP ratio, tumaas naman din.
From
Dahil-
39.6% to 61%.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we're paying for it anyway in
That's
another way. Like
That's correct.
now borrowing is more expensive
That's
because
correct.
of our debt to
That's correct.
GDP ratio. So in short, binabayaran pa rin yan ng taong bayan ngayon. This is just out of curiosity.
Mm.
So we're allocating a certain amount for PhilHealth this year anyway. Through the GAA,
Yes.
right?
And the reason for that is because of a law in the Universal Healthcare Act,
Which
we
is
all passed,
automatic.
and the sin tax law. So these are not hard earmarks, meaning to say, So there are laws like 80% of the total tax collected from tobacco, alcohol, sweetened beverages. There's a percentage of the revenues of PAGCOR, PCSO should be given to PhilHealth. And that is what is being proposed, let's say, in the budget for 2025. Congress can increase that further or even decrease that amount.
But yes, correct.
But the
It's
executive-
automatic because it's in the
Correct.
law.
Correct. And that's why the executive puts it in the budget. But then Congress has the authority to increase that or even decrease that amount.
So, Secretary, now they have remitted 30 billion to
Yes.
the national government. How much more and when are they expected to complete this?
Get the schedule. Can I get the schedule for the remittance? I just wanted to remind also the committee that it's not only PhilHealth, may PDIC din.
Oh, correct.
So
yeah.
we're getting roughly something like 100 billion from PDIC. So if you add both of them, more or less about 200 billion. Okay, so the remittance schedule is that on May 10, we received 20 billion. In August 21, we received 10 billion. We expect to receive another 30 billion on October 16, another 29 billion, 0.9 billion in November of 2024.
Okay.
It could also be earlier. That would depend on the cash flow or cash management of PhilHealth.
So by November is the last month.
It's the last
more or
month.
less.
Yes, more or less. Yeah.
So if there's no directive by the Supreme Court at that time,
Yes.
that will continue. But of course, the Supreme Court can always say, return the money.
They
Right?
could.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we will follow.
Yes,
Susunod
correct.
kami sa utos ng Korte Suprema.
Right. Okay. So that's now, at least we were able to clarify.
Yes.
On effect, on the RCEP. Last year, the Senate concurred with the ratification of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which aims to facilitate free trade among ASEAN nations and their partner countries. May we know from DOF and BOC what will be the impact of PCMP's cancellation to our RCEP related obligations and benefits?
Implications on revenues with customs. I think that's the question.
Yes, because supposedly uh, there is a connection between the Philippine Customs Modernization Project, which is a World Bank funded project which aims to upgrade customs processing. One of its components, maybe let me rephrase this. One of its components is the implementation of a unified system on various customs procedures, including the possible expansion to the NSW functionalities. The target completion date is 2025 with a total cost of 104.38 million US dollars. It is currently facing an injunction from the Manila RTC. So are we paying anything, obligation fees here? Magkano nang nagastos natin dito?
Madam Chair, there was already a loan cancellation of that.
How much is the loan cancellation?
If my memory serves me right, it's about 88. I'll check my records.
Nakaka-nervous yung 88 dollars ba yan o pesos? And anyway, you can submit that, but or can you check it now? O pwede na rin natin i-adjourn habang wala pang dumarating. Pwede na natin i-adjourn habang wala pang dumarating. No, I don't know. Are there any senators? No.
We,
No.
on the part of the DOF, we will have no objections.
I'm very sure. Okay, never mind. Let's go back to you later on, Commissioner, para we can fast track all of these other questions. The AMLAC, uh, can you tell me how many staff members you have or how many employees, the total employees of the AMLAC?
Good morning, Madam Chair. For the AMLC, the total authorized positions are 248,
248.
48 personnel, and the filled positions is 188.
And how much is your budget again, your total allocation for this 2025?
We are proposing, Madam Chair, for 346 million, 30,574 pesos, Madam Chair.
Okay. See, the reason why I'm asking, of course, the importance of your agency has come to light with the recent Alice Guo case, right? You helped in our executive session, and um, one of the things that actually um, made me realize is that usually, like a bank in itself, will have an entire floor dedicated to compliance. Okay. And then AMLAC, you only have 346 million in your budget. Okay. So you basically, so can you tell me, you basically just rely on the reports of the banks, right? If let's say they go over the 500,000 threshold in transactions. So you don't actually, let's say I own a particular bank or I manage a bank. Kung hindi ko sasabihin sa inyo na may transaction dito over that, hindi naman ninyo makikita, right?
Madam Chair, for the information of this committee, Madam Chair, the AMLC gets its information, number one, from the CTRs and STRs submitted by the banks, among other covered persons like the NFBPs, lawyers, jewelry shops, casinos, real estate brokers and developers, among other DNFBPs. Another information source for the AMLC are the information coming from law enforcement agencies and government agencies, from which we have MOUs with, like the NBI, the PNP, the other government agencies also.
So usually, so what you're trying to say, sir, is if it's submitted to you, correct?
They are submitted to us, Madam
Otherwise,
Chair.
they also submit a report maybe of the entire transactions of the bank for covered persons. But siguro kasing dami ng kwarto na to, so you don't have the manpower anymore. Would you be able to maybe explore in the future like an AI program that will do an analysis based on the factors that you feed in? Let's say covered persons. So kasama na kami dyan. 'Di ba? Those that work in the government, real estate brokers, as you mentioned, jewelry owners, maybe kasama ba dyan pati art? Let's say
Madam Chair,
hindi
no,
pa.
it's not a covered person.
Na okay. The reason why I'm asking this is because it's not humanly possible to actually go through every document that is submitted to your agency. So have you had any study to consider, let's say, an AI upgrade of your services?
Madam Chair, actually, in the AMLC, the AI project is already under development. We are about to complete it within this year. We already procured the suppliers more than a year ago. And in fact, Madam Chair, one of the proposed budget is for the procurement of the subscription for the AI, which is in our proposed budget is 50 million, more than 50 million, Madam Chair, for the subscription. Because if you develop an AI, you need subscription also annually. That's the biggest chunk of our ICT products that we are procuring for next year, Madam
And
Chair.
when will this be operational? If you subscribe, I mean your whole AI initiative, when it will be operational?
Madam Chair, it will be completed this year, but it will be operational early next year, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Provided that we will procure the subscription. After the completion of the development, we will procure a subscription for the AI, which is worth more or less 50
50
million
million.
plus.
Do you know what company will provide that?
The company is MDI, MDI
Is that
company.
did it go through a bidding and evaluation process? Is it
Yes,
a
Mr.
local or a foreign company?
It's a local company, Madam Chair.
Sigurado kayo ha na meron ba silang credibility, capitalization, lahat 'yan?
In fact, Madam Chair, it's a joint venture with Tiger Incorporated.
Sin
It's an IT company,
who is
Madam
that?
Chair.
Because I'd hate for it to stall again. Eh. If you have a company that's undercapitalized, that has no real track record. So can you just submit that to our committee, sir?
Yes, Madam Chair, we will submit the details.
And then
about
can
the
you
joint
tell
venture.
me our status with the Philippines still being kept in the gray list? Because I was actually the sponsor for the passing of the AMLAC amendment with the help of Senator Ralph Recto when he was in the Senate. Can you tell me what's going on? I heard it's more on the enforcement, but can you tell me what the update is?
Madam Chair, there are some good news regarding our efforts to exit the gray list. During the last cycle of the reporting cycle with the FATF, Madam Chair, we already upgraded the 3 action items during the last reporting cycle. We have 3 remaining action items, Madam Chair. That is,
Tell me what the first 3 items that you were able to comply with.
number 1 is about the beneficial ownership information. That is
Okay.
the agency being charged with that is the SEC.
Okay.
We were
and-
able to upgrade that, Madam Chair, to largely address.
okay. Number 2.
Another one is risk-based supervision of the NFBPs.
Which one again? I'm sorry.
Risk-based supervision
Risk.
of the NFBPs, designated non-financial businesses and professions. The one in charge with that is the AMLC, the CESA, APECO, and PAGCOR, Madam Chair. We were able to register a lot of the NFBPs and supervise them, Madam Chair.
PAGCOR, ha?
PAGCOR. They have a portion there regarding the risk-based supervisions of casinos, Madam Chair.
Number 3.
And number 3 is money laundering investigations, the prosecution, which is immediate outcome 7.3. We were able to investigate more money laundering cases, and the DOJ was able to file and initiate the preliminary investigation of more money laundering cases.
So ano na lang ang kulang natin? There are 3 more. What do we
Tatlo na lang po. Number 1 is PAGCOR. Handun pa rin po yung PAGCOR, yung IO 3.2,
Ano yun?
yung tungkol po sa junket operators. Yan po yung naiiwan pang isa. Number 2 po, ito po yung terrorism financing prosecution, which is immediate outcome 9.3. Meaning po, we need to file more terrorism financing cases until the end of this cycle, which is this month.
So it's just a matter of number of cases being filed.
Numbers na lang po sa terrorism financing. Ang pangatlo po yung cross-border implementation of cross-border measures. Ang in charge po dito yung ating Bureau of Customs. Yan na lang po ang naiiwan na action items. If you remember po, in June 2021, 18 po yung recommended action items po natin na inimpose sa atin ng FATF through the joint group. Pero ngayon na lang po, 3 na lang po siya. And we are hopeful na we will comply with all these action items by October of this year, meaning pag na-comply po natin ng action items by October this year, by early next year, which is January, malaki pong probability yung on-site visit na po.
Teka muna, ha? Mahirapan. Kasi meron ka ditong cross-border measures with the BOC and modernization.
Yes.
Hindi pa sila ready. Di ba? They're still just getting they're still trying to digitize. Sir, can you react to what he's saying? Because you're part of why there is a gray list, yung cross-border measures. So I guess part of it is the upgrade and modernization of the BOC.
Yes, Madam Chair. Actually, the issue there is about our the submission of the customs declaration, and because of our e-travel system now that's now up and running. We already solved that, Madam Chair. So we're okay with.
So please submit to them what you've already accomplished, and hopefully we can cross that one out from the list. So give me an update again, sir, when you have it. Kasi I'm just really curious kasi we worked hard on this na mapasa tong amendment para dun sa AMLAC and sana maging operational. It's been what, 2 years since we passed it? Okay, thank you, sir. With the biggest budget, we have the BIR. Of course, they're also the biggest revenue generating agency. So may I ask from the BIR commissioner why you have this budget that have been allocated? What is it for?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Well, for BIR, the biggest chunk of the budget would go to personnel services. That would be around 55% of the total budget. The next one is for the MOOE, which accounts for 34.25% or 6 billion. And for capital outlay, that's the third one, which accounts for 10.62% or about roughly about 1.8 billion pesos. So those are the composition of the 17 billion proposed budget for 2025.
How many employees do you have, sir?
The total filled positions as of December 31, 2023, it's about 15,600. But the total number of plantilla positions about around 21,000.
So 15, did you say 50,600?
15, 15,
One
Madam
five.
Chair.
15,600 is what, sir?
The filled positions,
Field, okay. And the total number of employees is 21,000.
around 21.
Plantilla. Okay. Can you actually file your taxes online now?
Yes, we have that electronic filing and payment system working in the EBIR forms where you can do the filing and also payment online, Madam Chair.
And how many percent actually have used, I mean, in terms of the total filings, how many have done it online?
I think for those enrolled, I could say a lot of taxpayers are already using, but in terms of the number, ano ba tayo dyan?
So we can, if you have it, yeah.
For this year, 2024, the number of manually filed returns about 1 million. Number of e-filed returns about 11.17 million for a total filed returns of about 12.26 million. So the number of percentage of share of e-filed returns about 91%, Madam Chair.
Really? 91% have filed electronically. Pero when they file electronically, Commissioner, wala ba dyan na note sa ilalim na see us personally in the office? Wala namang ganon? Is it filed and completed?
Yes, it's filed and then you pay online as well, Madam Chair.
91% have, ha?
91%. That's why every April during the tax filing season, if you'll notice, the lines are really short in
Yes,
our
yes.
district offices because of this electronic filing and payment already.
And this includes businesses, they can file online, right?
Yes.
Well, congratulations, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam
Yes.
Chair.
Last two questions. Pang wala pa yung mga ito. In 2023, no. Let's now turn to the budgetary adjustments that the DOF received in 2023. Pero wala ka pa yata nun eh. Apparently, the DOF received 1,467,000,000 plus pesos for foreign assisted projects. What were these projects, considering this is larger than the actual regular budget of the agency and half of all the budgetary adjustments received in 2023?
Retrieving the data. Yeah. There is one with the BLGF, I suppose. Yeah, maybe Executive Director. Could you explain the foreign assistance project of the Bureau of Local Government Finance?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Yeah, at present, the Bureau of Local Government Finance is implementing a local governance reform project funded by ADB. And just recently, we were able to request for an extension of the project for another 2 years. And that we are now, the details of the extension includes the change in scope as we included a particular system to be developed under the project, which is the financial reporting system.
What is it again? What system? Financial
The financial reporting system.
reporting
Yes,
system.
because under the newly passed Real Property Valuation and Assessment Act, there are two systems that are to be developed by the BLGF under the project.
Okay.
That is what we call the Real Property Information System and a computerized mass appraisal system for the local government units.
LGU component.
Yes, ma'am. And these two systems should complement with the financial reporting system of local treasurers. They have it right now, but we need to develop a new one because the programming technology already used in that existing system is already outdated. And that is the reason for the change in scope under the project.
Okay. Can you submit that to me? What particular project that is?
Yeah,
please?
we will do.
Thank you.
Honor.
Now the DOF in 2023 received 1,467,000,000 pesos for foreign assisted projects. What are these projects again?
Well, my recollection is it's only one project. It's the BLGF.
That's just it.
That's just it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I have to go back to the BIR because there's some concerns about how much percent of our tax revenue comes from MSMEs, sir?
Madam Chair, I don't have that exact figure right now, but we'll submit the data as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Now, how much tax revenue would we generate if we were to tax Lazada, Shopee, any online? Because consumers are worried that they'll have to pay more because it will be passed on to them, considering. But I understand because I myself shop online. So, I know that if there are taxes to be levied upon my purchases, it will be higher. But actually, in cases like in the US, for example, you buy from Amazon, it depends on what state it will be shipped to, or then you will have to carry the burden of the tax. Like if you live in California, there is a higher tax rate than if you live elsewhere in the US. So have we already imposed this for online vendors?
Right now, Madam Chair, we already imposed the withholding tax system on the uh, from online sellers using the online platforms, selling platforms. That's just about half, 1/2 of 1% of the gross sales. But we impose this in on online sellers that are selling above more than 500,000 pesos. So the small online sellers are not covered by this. And again, this withholding tax is not a new tax. It's just creditable withholding tax that is ultimately deductible from the final income tax that they will have to pay eventually at the end of the year. And it should not actually result in increase in the prices because they should know that when they engage in business, they're really liable for income tax if the threshold would make them liable for income tax. So they should really pay for it because it's really unfair for all those the brick and mortar stores that they're really paying and registering with BIR. So this is a way to at least uh, get them inside the net. level the playing field.
Yeah.
How much again? One something of 1%? What
One
is
half
it?
of 1%.
Ang liit pa nun, di ba? One
Yes.
half of 1%.
And that's creditable withholding tax. So that
Credit.
that could be credited eventually in the final computation of the income tax that
So
they
sa
have to pay.
ating mga mamimili sa online, hindi naman kargado pa sa kanila kasi kung meron ka naman talagang negosyo, whether online or not, you really have to pay these things, right? So this is nothing new. Now, may VAT ba?
If I may, the Congress just passed the
Mm.
VAT on digital services. And that will be signed by the President anytime within the next 30 days. So we are now preparing together with the BIR, the implementing rules and regulations. And we're expected to generate next year roughly about 20 billion from
From
VAT
online
from online.
transactions.
VAT on digital services. Yes.
Kasi what I'm wondering now is, kasi when you buy something, let's say you go to the grocery, it's at 10 pesos, nakakarga na doon yung VAT di ba? Hindi na, not like in other countries, you pay a total, then they add the VAT in the end. In our case, it's already marked as priced, right? Including the VAT, am I correct?
So they add it to the receipt. So whatever the price of the good or service plus 12% would be the VAT.
It's
Yes.
not in the reflection. I thought it's already reflected, but in the end they total the number of VAT items.
Correct. Correct.
Okay,
So
so
they add it, yes.
so in short now, when after this law is signed by the president, anything that we buy online will have an additional 12% for
No.
VAT. No.
It's just leveling the playing field again. If your gross sales is less than 3 million a year, you are not vatable. So anything above 3 million is vatable. Siguro yung malaki dito, yung mga Netflix.
Mm-mm.
So those are one of the bigger ones that we're looking at.
So if your business generates less than 3 million pesos a year,
Yes,
you don't have to charge VAT for the items that you sell?
that's correct. But there is a 3%, there's a consumption tax of 3% below 3 million under the tax code. So the idea is to also collect that in the internet space. Now, we might also start with half of 1%.
I'm sorry?
We might also start with half of 1%.
Okay.
So just the visibility. So half of 1% creditable income, that's an income tax, and then maybe half of 1% creditable consumption tax.
All right. There's a lot of things to remember with these codes. Uh, I will defer to the experts here to be able to explain all of that. But yes, again, just para lang sa kaalaman ng ating mga kababayan na hindi naman drastic. It's usually yung mga malalaking kumpanya na merong online transactions. Okay. Wala pa ako nakikita and nobody has to be fair, this hearing was announced. Okay, and we sent a text message to all the offices, but there are other more interesting hearings today, so thank God they're all there. The Maharlika na lang, sir, just give us a general update kasi baka sabihin naman nila hindi ko man lang tinanong eh. Mr. Consing, what's happening with Maharlika now?
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am. I'm going to be discussing this according to three pillars. So I'll start first with governance. With governance, ma'am, the law required us to establish 2 committees in the board, but instead we established 6. So the law required us to put up the audit and the risk management committee, but instead we added corporate governance and ethics, related party transactions, also investment committee, and nomination and remuneration. So we basically brought in the practices of the private sector and we applied it in Maharlika. So that's on the governance side. We're also on our 14th board meeting, so it is a very active board. The board is also comprised of about 5 individuals from the private sector out of 9. However, one seat has yet to be filled. That would be the role of a regular director.
Which money are you holding right now?
At the moment, ma'am, we've got about 75 billion. That's 25 billion coming from DBP and 50 billion coming from Land Bank of the Philippines. In addition to which, we've already generated about 144 million in retained earnings last year when we started placing the money in November of last year, and another about 1.4 billion this year. So hence total about 1.5 billion in interest income. thus far.
1.5 billion in what?
In interest income, ma'am.
In interest income.
Yes.
But how
1.5
much how much is your operation cost, sir?
Well, we have yet to spend. That
But-
said, the budget that we have is going to be is for about 336 million pesos. And that's divided into, well, capex et al. So that's for the entire budget.
Do you have an office already?
Yes, we do, ma'am.
Where is it?
It's at the BGC, at the Ore Central Building in BGC.
So basically now in interest payments, you made about 1.5 billion.
An interest income of
Interest
1.5 Yes,
income.
ma'am, 1.54 billion. Yes.
Okay. I understand also from Senator Ralph, they haven't really been paid. I mean, because they're, right?
That's
Government.
correct. That's correct. In fact, bago lang yung opisina.
Yeah.
Bago
Ma'am,
pa lang.
ma'am, if I may, ma'am. So that's absolutely correct. The Secretary Rect is correct. We're currently going through a process. The reality is that if you take a look at the law, whilst there are certain exemptions that are provided to Maharlika, we are a GOCC, so therefore everything that we do, we basically follow what the rules are in respect of GCG et al. If I may also just give an observance, ma'am. If you look at the way, if you look at the rules of the GCG, who where we basically follow all the rules in terms of setting up the organization et al. If you look at the rules, ma'am, the reality is that they're really not prepared to accept or assist startup institutions. So they've actually gone out of their way, out of the rules, out of the regulations. Because if you look at the regulations today, the nearest that it would be for startup institutions is for reorganization. So they've got rules for reorganization, but they have no rules for startups. So therefore, for us, for example, whenever we go to the agencies, they're very helpful, but they're only helpful to the extent that the rules allow them to. So thus, we have to navigate all these. So we've already received, for example, our approval for non-technical compensation. So once that's approved by the president, we have to go through another process in respect of the GCG. But in simultaneous to that, we're now drawing up the policies for appointing or designating an individual as highly technical. And once those guidelines have been set up, then we go through the process of actually designating and going for.
How many employees do you have right now?
Ma'am, today we have got, well, the board we're about
5.
well, we're about 8 in the board, ma'am. All of whom are actually, it's a working board.
Okay.
Okay. But in my team, informally, we're about 8, 9, including myself.
That includes all the support staff?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
9?
Yes.
Okay. When are you gonna start investing the money that you have? 50 billion from Land Bank?
We have about 8 memorandums of agreement currently undertaking due diligence on 2 very important investments. Intuitively, both in the energy sector, and intuitively, we expect perhaps that in the next 60 to 90 days, we should be able to deploy, ma'am.
Can you give us, the committee, a copy of those companies that are applying, or this is confidential?
No, we can absolutely, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Just submit. We don't have to discuss it today.
Yes, ma'am.
So with that, this I asked, the proposed budgets of the DOF, its attached agencies, the AMLC, are deemed submitted to plenary. This hearing is now suspended. Congratulations.
Thank you, Madam Chair.